The end of the season at Elland Road has come, being that all of the matches at Elland Road are done now, so it comes to going to the London Stadium at the weekend to see if we'll end up relegating West Ham or if we'll end up helping to relegate Spurs. Either way, very funny. But the focus has turned to Elland Road in a different manner as bits of the development are now either underway or being heavily discussed at the moment. And in this video, I'm going to talk about how the development is now underway, what we can expect to see over the summer, and a couple of recent announcements that happened in a press conference yesterday that I think are very much worthy of a little bit of conversation. So, to start with, the bits of development that are underway, I'm sure you will have all seen the pictures of various bits of construction that are happening behind the West End that are basically the start of the West End redevelopment, which is, I would argue, the most important part of the redevelopment considering it's the biggest one and it's the one that will presumably stick. We've started it. We've started this one, and it can't not happen. In theory, I guess the North Stand redevelopment could maybe not happen, but I mean, that's unlikely. But once this is underway, this is underway. This is the entire project up and going. Fantastic. There were rumours of the press and media guys being told to just get out of Elland Road fairly sharpish after the match because demolition was starting from like that evening, which is really nice and quick progress. I'm glad to see it. In addition to that, there is a reasonable chance that we asked the Premier League if we could have the final game of the season away from home. There's a pretty good chance that we'll ask the Premier League if we can have the first week of the season also away from home next year so we can get as much work done throughout the summer in Elland Road without having to sort of pop people into the new bit of West Stand, which is quite clever. It's presumably also why we probably won't see any home friendlies this summer unless I've missed something, which I completely understand. It makes sense, focus on getting the infrastructure done. But then we got to talk about the various bits that were discussed in Pete Lowey's press conference with the Mayor of West Yorkshire as well, whose name I have completely forgotten, which is a little bit of a problem. Tracy Brabin, that's the one. And I think a couple of very interesting little tidbits came out of that. So, to begin with, Pete Lowry is very much all in on this redevelopment. He is an investor in the club. He might be a director. He is a director, and he also works for the Lowy Family Group, which is a sort of property company slash developer, which is absolutely fantastic. Always good to have someone who knows what they're doing on the board, which we very much do this time. And he was speaking at a sort of conferencey thing, specifically discussing the Elland Road neighbourhood and stadium development, both of them combined, which is very interesting because I think that is going to massively regenerate things. I'll get into why in a little bit of time. But he basically said that the key to investment in Leeds is the redevelopment of Elland Road because it's been a little bit of an anchor on the area for the last 40 years. It's very, very hard to redevelop an area around a football stadium if the football stadium isn't keeping pace. Wembley as an area was relatively downtrodden. I say relatively because it's London, and London, as a rule of thumb, doesn't tend to be a complete mess because that eats all the government funding. But compared to where it is now, Wembley was a little bit on the worse off side. Stadium went up, and immediately around the stadium, anyone that's been there will be like, "Oh, cool! There's big old high-rise buildings all over the shop. Decent shopping place. You can tell that this place has undergone a regeneration." Football stadiums at the core of that are fairly typical and is what you can basically expect to see in a lot of different places. Similar to Stratford when it took on the Olympic project, because Stratford previously was a literal toxic dump. The waterways were full of like animal corpses and stuff because it used to have the biggest slaughterhouse in the country, I believe. But then regeneration happened, things improved. The goal is something like that for Elland Road and the area around it, which is fantastic. And the main focus seemed to be in this conversation on the light rail and tram movement between the city centre and Elland Road slash the White Rose. So another specific point that Pete Lowy made was you get 1 million rides annually just by running it from the city centre to Elland Road. With that alone, because there's going to be 19 home match days at the very least, and then you've occasionally got cups and you've got friendlies. So that means that there is almost certainly plenty of use on that line, and there'll be use day to day because people in the city centre will want to go to the White Rose. People might want to park up at the White Rose to go into the city centre, all kinds of stuff, which is a very, very useful thing to do. When it comes to the West End itself, He mentioned that it'll be a 3 to 3.5 season development job, and the pitch is going to be relayed a few different times. Again, makes complete sense if you're doing construction basically above the pitch. You're going to want to make sure the pitch is in the best possible condition, and when you're building things, things aren't going to stay neat and tidy. You're going to want to refresh the pitch relatively often just to make sure that there's no contaminants, anything along those lines. Makes plenty of sense, in my opinion. And it also means that the bulk of that development will happen in the off-season periods, whereas whilst the season is going on, it's going to be more a case of maybe through the week we'll do a couple of bits and bobs, but we can't do the bulk of the work because obviously we've got matches going on. Yeah, you'll have 2 weeks between home games a lot of the time, but that's far from a guarantee, which is something that is fairly important to keep in mind. And he did keep that in mind by sort of saying that you can't have. I'm going to take the quote directly here just to make sure it's all right. You can't have a world class team without a world class stadium without being in a world class area, which is a sort of statement, in my opinion, that if it takes time, it takes time, but this is setting the foundation for improving Leeds United. Part of the point on the world class area as well is one of the reasons that I've seen players occasionally list for not coming to a club like Leeds, like Liverpool as another example, is the area that you would be living in isn't quite at the same standard as London. So building up the area around the ground, around the club, around the city as a whole benefits us massively here. So the Lowy family group have also said that they will be responsible for 30 acres of space around the ground. That's what you will have seen on the various images that are like, I think Lewis, LUFC Lewis Dayton, posted on Twitter saying, why is there a city behind the West Stand? That area, basically, is what the Lowy family group will be responsible for, and basically building all of that up and making sure that it is up to snuff with the rest of the area. That, he said, will take 8 years, given that there will be light rail slash tram involvement. Light rail slash tram involvement means that plenty of movement in and out, which is absolutely key for moving not only people but money in this instance, because obviously if you're going to build sort of shopping areas around the stadium, you kind of need people to be there outside of match days, which is going to be fairly key in my opinion. And importantly, it will make the stadium a Category 4 stadium. For context, a Category 4 stadium is one that is deemed adequate to hold Champions League matches, but not only that, for international footballing events, such as the Euros, such as the World Cup. The fact that we dragged our feet on this so hard means that the 2028 Euros got away from us a little bit, which is a little bit of a shame because obviously it would have been quite nice to have the Euros in Leeds. It feels like that would have been absolutely wonderful. But that's fine. That's going to happen. But there is a little bit of conversation around an upcoming World Cup. And I say upcoming, it's a long way away right now. But there is word around potentially a British bid for 2038. And at that point, hopefully, we're able to say, look, stadium's Category 4, let's do something. Ideally, that would be wonderful because just sort of being able to invite the world to Leeds and say, look at how fantastic our ground is, look at how fantastic the people are, would be great. The entire area will presumably see an improvement, well, not an improvement, but an increase in the housing stock as well. This was specifically discussed with 2,500 homes in the area being built. That's in the sort of mini city behind the West Stand. And there is full government support from Tracy Brabin, who has said that the trams will come. I think she specifically said, in Yorkshire we don't. I'll find the specific wording actually. She said, we have full governmental support, we're going to deliver that tram, we'll make it happen. There was a signing of a memorandum of understanding, and she also said something along the line of, we don't do things by halves. So hopefully that points to the fact that we'll get the tram. We know that the West Stand and North Stand expansion are going to happen. Hopefully the area around the ground gets brought up a little bit as well, because occasionally it does feel a little bit industrial sitey, but that's fine. And yeah, I'm really sort of looking forward to the direction the stadium heads in. But as always, that's just what I'm thinking based on the press conferencey thing that was yesterday. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Like the video if you enjoyed it, as always. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Become a channel member. all the fun stuff. Sorry I've only been able to gesticulate with one hand. There is a baby asleep on me right here, which makes it quite difficult to do videos, but thankfully she stayed asleep because she was being very difficult before I started it. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all later. Toodaloo.